On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, who should the Thunder hope to play after the NBA play-in tournament? We'll break it all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, beat writer for InsideTheThunder.com and media member Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. On today's show, we're joined by Michael Martin, Michael on Sports on Twitter, and Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube to discuss the Thunder's potential first-round matchups. Who would be the best, the worst, and most likely case scenario for the Oklahoma City Thunder? We'll break it all down on today's show, brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'll admit, there's a bit of a competitive side to me, and that includes on Monopoly Go. It's the mobile hit game with a twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go right now on the App Store or Google Play Store. Michael, how are you doing today as the NBA postseason officially kicks off?
I'm doing great. I'm still recovering from this weekend of us trying to understand all the tiebreakers, but luckily everything fell into place, and I'm still a little bit just blown back by the new intro. I hadn't seen that before. That's nice.
I appreciate that. The good folks at Locked On with the new intro for the postseason. But Michael, everything did shake right for the Thunder as Denver blows a 20-point lead to San Antonio, and they're able to hand over the 1 seed to OKC. Now, with the 1 seed, the Thunder await their next opponent in the first round. First and foremost, I've been a big proponent of I view it as a little bit more of a disadvantage than the Thunder view it of not knowing your opponent until Friday. Where do you fall on the advantages and disadvantages of not knowing your opponent until Friday night?
I'll start with the advantages, and that's just that it looks like the last play-in game will be on Friday to determine who the Thunder are going to play, and then game one's on Sunday. So they get 1 day off in between that. They're playing a lot more games. The Thunder have had a full week. So that's, I guess, one of the advantages. But disadvantages, I'm right there with you in terms of like not knowing your opponent. I thought Mark had a good quote the other day when I think you asked him about it, and he goes, well, we played all these teams so many times, all these players. The NBA is a bit of a bubble. Like we've got a pretty good scout on everybody, but I still think that there is some advantage of really getting that entire week or X amount of days more than just the 1 or 2 that they're going to get to really dive in, scout, and sort of counter other team strategies.
Yeah, I think that from a scouting standpoint, in terms of just the traditional, like watching film, obviously it's not that big of a deal considering, like Mark said, it's not like college where in college you might play a team you've never played before, but you're playing teams that you're very familiar with. But in terms of installing like specific wrinkles, if you only have Saturday to install stuff and practice, that's a bit of a disadvantage. But nonetheless, you'd rather play a team who is having to play two playoff caliber games to make it to that point. You can argue that those teams can get hot in that span, but also they go through a lot of exhaustion. And I think that the Thunder will probably get the benefit of rest advantage multiple times. I think that this will be a series where you play Sunday and only get like 1 day off in between game 1 and 2 to really make the play-in teams play at a disadvantage for a little bit longer before you get a longer layoff to head on the road. So it'll be interesting in that aspect. Ultimately, I fall on you'd rather be the 1 seed and you'd rather deal with whatever disadvantage there is from the other team being able to not know what their outcome is until Friday. But I think that it does dampen things, especially in terms of like our content a little bit of not knowing who is going to be the team. But we'll find out halfway there on tonight's play-in tournament games, which you and I will be watching on Twitter Spaces. So you can go to my Twitter account, Rylan_Stiles, or Michael's at Michael on Sports to watch the tournament with us. But Michael, there's now 4 possibilities for the Thunder. It's between the Kings, Warriors, Pelicans, and Lakers. Let's start by just ranking in order of least afraid to most afraid of in terms of who can pull off the 1-8 upset by the Thunder, with the least likely, like you would just be stunned if this team won the first round series over Oklahoma City. I think that we'll probably both have the same answer here.
Probably the Kings. They're just so shorthanded, and coming off of this where they're going to play so many games, and then they get the Thunder who have these young legs who are just waiting for them, chomping at the bit. I think that's a really bad matchup for them. And Sacramento's just been bitten by the injury bug. They were super healthy last year, but I'd say Sacramento's probably one.
Yeah, Sacramento is the team that I think that you should be least afraid of, because you look at it post All-Star break, they've been mediocre, 15-13. That has included a ton of blown leads, including a 20-point blown lead to OKC. Injuries piling up, their offense is taking a step back in the second half, and so with the injuries, with the post All-Star break blunders that have happened, you can go listen to Locked On Kings to find out all the just depths that they've gone to over there in Sacramento. And then you look at the season series, which was split between the two teams in 4 games. The Kings were able to beat the Thunder early in November in a very tight game. Both teams got a very comfortable win in there. And then the Thunder erased a 20-point deficit to get another win. So I think that the regular season shows how close these two teams are, even when they were both at full strength back in November. And now that the Kings are missing some key cogs to their rotation, you've got to feel good about the Thunder. Obviously, the Golden One Center would be a very tough place to play, as evidenced by last season, but not a so tough place to play that you would just be fearful of this young team going on the road. With that being said, Sabonis against Chet for 7 games would be very intriguing, but even if the Kings just dominate that matchup, I still think the Thunder have enough to outlast the Kings in a 7-game set.
It's a tougher place to play than a tougher team, I think. I think that the environment is going to be a little bit crazy. I would probably pick the Thunder in 5 for that one. I think that crowd and just the Kings not wanting to get swept and having some pride would probably propel them to 1 win. But you mentioned Chet and that dynamic, and then we've talked about Lou Dort guarding Fox, but it really comes down to the Kings have no one to match up with Shea or J-Dub. And if you have nothing at all for that, you're just going to get consistently driving kicks, getting to the basket. And I don't think the Kings can keep up with the high level talent and sort of the depth that the Thunder have.
And then my number 2 team that I would love to see the Thunder face off with is actually the Golden State Warriors. And I know that they're the big bad Warriors, and a lot of Thunder fans will have PTSD from the Warriors in the postseason and what that means historically for these two franchises. But this young Thunder team is too naive to understand that. They're not going to be so fearful of this over-the-hill Warriors team that it really hurts them in any way. You've seen that from Shea poking the bear on Instagram. You've seen that from the Thunder playing the Warriors not only tough, but going and beating the Warriors in Golden State in overtime, dismantling them in Golden State as well, but they were shorthanded, so that really doesn't even count. And getting the better of the Warriors, outlasting them in critical games, even though they're so young, with the only loss to the Warriors coming with a very controversial ending that did not include SGA in the lineup for Oklahoma City. And so I would be fearful of Steph Curry, who can go off for 50 points in an elimination game against a young team as he did last year. But that supporting cast is way lackluster for the depth and the talent that the Thunder possess. And I just think that, you wouldn't sweep the Warriors, but you certainly would feel good about playing the Warriors.
There was a part of me that almost wanted to pick the Warriors as the number 1 team that you would be least fearful of, because it really comes down to, like we've talked about, Sabonis and Fox, and I think they're both worse players than Steph, but it's Steph by himself. And these are not the Warriors of old, and they're I don't know, bread and butter is still going small, which plays exactly into the Thunder's hands. If you want to play small, it's like, great, we'll have Chet go out there at 5, or Kenrich or Jay Will or whoever. Like, that plays right into their hands. And there's just not a lot of guys who put fear in my heart on that Warriors squad. And then going back to another point with the Kings of just who guards Shea and Dub. Like, I don't think Gary Payton's really getting the job done. I don't think Andrew Wiggins is really going to stop either of those guys. Draymond, I don't think, is at that stage of his career where he can do that anymore. And Clay's been sort of robbed of his quickness and athleticism by these injuries. So I would take the Thunder in that one. But I'll say, just to wrap back around, Kings 1, and then I'd say the Warriors slightly at 2. But do you think it's very close?
Yeah, I really could go either way. You can talk me into it either way. The thing that I would say is close is the fact of Sabonis versus Chet, because I do give Sabonis a lot of credit if fully healthy, which he seems to be at this point against Chet. But at the same time, I think either one of these options is a great choice for the Thunder. Like, I think that it's very close in both directions in terms of the bottom 4 and the top of the 4 for the Pelicans and Lakers that we're going to get to. But yeah, I would pretty confidently go Kings as the best case scenario, Warriors as the second best, because there is an element of, Steph can go for 50. And for as good as I think that Sabonis is, for as good as I think that Fox is, I don't think that either one of them could have this otherworldly game and beat the Thunder in a massive elimination type of setting.
Yeah, I just don't fear those guys really either. I think Steph, like he's gotten to this level and this level of respect for a reason. He's a killer and he's somebody who can go off at any time. Defense doesn't really matter. But I do think the Thunder, of all the teams that could play him, have some decent personnel to guard him, whether it's Dub or Kaysen, I think, to give him some problems. But yeah, I think if you're just in terms of like which firepower is more lethal, it's definitely Steph and the Warriors.
Yeah, it's for sure Steph and the Warriors, just because, and maybe this is a disservice to the Kings, but whenever you're closing your eyes and imagine this playoff series, could you imagine a big Draymond swing moment, whether that's injuring somebody or getting into a brawl or something, or just simply good play on the court, in a Klay Thompson huge 3-point game, and to swing one of the 4 wins that you need if you're Golden State trying to chase down an upset win? Could you imagine that more than you could the Kings, what's left of their supporting cast, and even Sabonis and Fox going off? I think that you absolutely can. So that's why I would give the edge to the Kings as the team that you'd rather see.
Yeah, I can't really argue with that, especially some of the things with just their institutional knowledge of those guys being together. They're not going to be nervous if they get down 0-2 to the Thunder, like the Kings might sort of panic. And then some of those X factors of just like Draymond getting somebody else suspended, Draymond injuring somebody, whatever that happens, and just mucking up the series because he can kind of get away with certain things with the referees that the Thunder can't. So I'm with you. I still think it's close, but you're convincing me more and more that it should be a little bit wider with the Kings at 1.
Coming up, who should the Thunder least want to see? Is it the Pelicans? Is it the Lakers? We'll talk about that coming up. But first, I want to tell you right now, better good friends over at BetterHelp. Check out BetterHelp right now because it's great. It offers you the benefits of therapy with some modern stability as well, because there's certain moments where we all need to get something off of our chest. No matter if it's big or small, certain things can really start to fester with you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. So today, make sure you check out BetterHelp and go there, because we know that things can get stressful around this time of year. And if you're someone like me who was like said, hey, the therapy portion of things I could really benefit from, but I'm too busy to go to an actual building and find a real life therapist in person. It's just too much time, too much of a commitment. That excuse goes out the window with BetterHelp, because they have licensed therapists waiting for you to be completely online and suited around your schedule and totally flexible around your time. You just fill out their questionnaire. They match you with a licensed therapist. If that's the therapist that you jive with, great. If not, you can just simply go for a new therapist free of charge until you find the one that's right for you. So check it out today at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA, betterhelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA for 10% off of your first month at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for joining me on this show. Plus, Michael Martin is here. Michael on Sports on Twitter. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael, it's between the Pelicans and the Lakers. Who do you think is the third best option for OKC?
I'd say we go down to the Big Easy. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but I would take the Pelicans over the Lakers as number 3. You've seen these two teams play a lot recently. They're a team, for whatever reason, that Josh Giddey gets superpowers against. I'm not exactly sure how or why it happens, but other than Zion, I know Brandon Ingram's coming back. They're just a team that doesn't threaten me as much as the size and experience of the Lakers. I still think that they have a really nice team, but I would pick the Thunder to win that, mainly in part because they have far and away the best player in the series in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yeah, you kind of hit all the right notes. I mean, sometimes you just have a team's number, and I think that the Thunder have the Pelicans' number for whatever the reason is. Like you look at it, number one, first and foremost, you talk about the inexperience with this Thunder team, and that's only going to grow louder this week as you get closer and closer to all these playoff previews. Well, what's the only place, the one and only place we've seen this young Thunder team go in a postseason game? It's down there in New Orleans. And for whatever reason, like you mentioned, Josh Giddey plays exceptional basketball against the Pelicans. And in 2 very massive games has played Jonas Valanciunas off the court, including the play-in last year where his center he's paired with was Jay Will. No offense to Jay Will, but of course Chet's a better big man and a more versatile big man to help you play Valanciunas off the floor. And most importantly, the Thunder are a blown 22-point lead back in November from sweeping the Pelicans in the regular season and winning games close, and also, most importantly, winning games by a pretty wide margin. The reason these Pelicans are so high, though, is because you have Zion, you have CJ, you have Brandon Ingram, who should return, should be healthy, and you also have the best defender, I think, in the NBA when it comes to guarding Shea and Herb Jones. So it's not a doomsday matchup for OKC. I think that the Thunder would still win that series, but I think that they make you work for it a little bit more than the Kings do and the Warriors do.
Yeah, I think that it's not that they're a bad team. They're a good team. They just match up with the Thunder sort of poorly on some of these things. And one thing I noticed is in the last one where Chet fouled out, you can really see the difference in the numbers of him on the floor and off the floor in terms of Zion's efficiency. So just having Chet out there, I think, neutralizes a lot of that, even though Zion is just this bowling ball going towards the rim. But good points about Josh playing Valanciunas off the floor, and Herb Jones is a pretty good defender on Shea, but we've seen no real sign of him just slowing him down. One thing that's really stood out to me over these last few games where they played against each other is Shea makes like an A1 effort priority of like, get this guy in foul trouble early. And if they continue doing that, I'm just not too worried about anybody stopping Shea or slowing him down from the Pelican side.
And the big key is if you're relying on Herb Jones to shut down Shea, you cannot have a single game in this series go the way that last game did in New Orleans, where Herb Jones gives away 2 of his 6 fouls by swiping at by swiping at Isaiah Joe and then jumping into Lou Dort on a shot fake. You cannot give away 2 of your 6 fouls doing that. And in that same game, the Thunder's own flexibility. This is where I give Mark a lot of credit. This is why I think that despite him never having coached in a playoff series yet, I still take him over most coaches in this league, is because in that game, you had J-Dub cooking early. And instead of holding true to his stubborn rotation like most coaches will do, he pulls Shea early as Herb Jones is in foul trouble and still on the court, and lets J-Dub go and cook. And that, in turn, lets J-Dub keep being the hot hand and not taking anything away from him. Shea was off to a slow start, gets him on the bench. And when Shea returns, now Herb Jones is off the floor. So now Shea is going up against lesser defenders. And when you give that option to Shea, he's going to dominate. So the Thunder's flexibility and the way that they can beat you with their coach's flexibility, I think is a big deal in that matchup. And we know how big foul troubles are. And recently you've seen Chet get called for a little bit more of the offensive fouls here late. That can't happen either in the postseason. But Herb Jones is a defender who's going to get caught playing physically, even on guys like Joe and Dort, and especially whenever J-Dub and Shea are on him. That can turn a series, even though he is one of the best defensive options on the Thunder, which still is not going to be as though he's going to neutralize them. Michael, that only leaves one team, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't want to speak for you, but for me personally, just because I have the Lakers as the worst matchup for the Thunder does not mean I agree with Bill Simmons, who says that there's no chance that the Thunder beat the Lakers. There's absolutely a chance the Thunder beat the Lakers. I still probably would pick the Thunder in a 7-game series over the Lakers. But you can also acknowledge, hey, the Lakers do schematically play a really nice style of basketball that can help them counteract what the Thunder like to do.
Yeah, I would say that they have the best chance to beat the Thunder out of these teams. I think that's the best way to look at it. I wouldn't say by any means just like, oh, if the Thunder draw the Lakers, they're doomed. I mean, we've seen them beat the Lakers in past seasons. It's 3-1 this year, but I don't know necessarily that encapsulates the entire season of things. And you mentioned the Lakers is a bad matchup. Anthony Davis really kind of neutralizes a lot of things that make the Thunder offense special, with Chet spacing out. And then LeBron's just an incredibly big matchup problem for the Thunder. And then just to put our tinfoil caps on, the Lakers this year, Rylan, have a plus 420 free throw attempt differential, which is like double the next team. So there could be some weird things that go on. So overall, I think you just, on top of the bad matchup, you just want to avoid the Lakers at all costs.
Yeah, and part of that whistle disparity is going to be twofold, in the sense of even stripping away this Lakers narrative and the narrative that the league loves LA and they want to push LeBron and push this team. Even taking that away, the Lakers have 2 superstars. The Thunder have 1 in the eyes of the officials. You've seen it all year long. J-Dub, despite driving and despite being an elite scorer and despite being a great option for the Thunder, he does not get calls. Josh Giddey does not get calls. These guys don't get calls besides Shea. At the very least, the Lakers, even before you mention a Lakers whistle, at the very least, they have two superstars who will get the benefit of the call in LeBron and in Anthony Davis. So I think that does matter without it coming off as, oh, it's just because it's the Lakers. It's just a proven fact in the NBA. That's why it's called a superstar whistle. And the Thunder get the benefit of it too sometimes with SGA, but they only get one benefit while, the Lakers are one of the teams that get multiple guys on there, whereas the Pelicans don't have a multiple superstar supporting cast in the eyes of NBA officials. So that is a big deal. And making Shea play in a crowd while also being able to funnel stuff into Anthony Davis at the rim will make life tough for Oklahoma City. With that being said, is there anyone who, if it comes out on Friday at 11:59, that you're going to say, okay, yeah, I picked them over the Thunder in this group?
No, I don't see that happening. I think the Thunder, like we said, it'll be tougher against the Lakers, but I would still take them in a win. I know that I mentioned sort of like the free throws and sort of the referee parts, but if we're just going on the floor, some of the advantages the Lakers have, their experience, their size, their rebounding. And I think that there's a real case in terms of just going one-on-one with a guy like LeBron, who's just a basketball like maestro in the half court to end games versus a much younger team who hasn't been in a lot of these scenarios. That's not the guy you want to face off in that. That's like playing Steph in a 3-point contest.
Yeah, I don't think that you want to face LeBron in this sort of environment. Now, we always do on this show before big events, best, worst, and most likely case scenario. I think we both agree now the best case scenario is the Kings. So however that gets done, that's the best case scenario. And the absolute worst case scenario is the LA Lakers. However, what do you think is the most likely outcome for the Thunder?
I think it's probably going to be the Pelicans. I think that the Lakers, who've had their number all year, don't mess around with the whole idea that we're seeing from a lot of pundits of like, oh, throw that game so you can get the Thunder. I don't think that's the way that these teams think or these players think, because if you drop that game, you are one Steph Curry hot shooting night away, or Fox or whatever, or Anthony Davis has never beaten Sabonis from just going home and not playing in the postseason at all. So I think it ends up being the Pelicans. I think that they're the next best team out of that group, but I'm curious to see what you think or hear.
Yeah, I think that whenever you look at this, the Lakers are not going to throw this game on Tuesday night. It's just not going to happen. Whenever you look at the pathway to get there, I don't think that the Warriors at this stage are going to be able to win 2 road games to get into the playoffs. I don't think that the Kings have enough depth to win 2 road games to get into the playoffs. And so even though I don't think that the Lakers are going to throw this game against New Orleans, it would be disappointing for New Orleans to lose 2 home games in back-to-back play-ins as the upper hand in the seeding in that case. Obviously, last year was a lot different because if they lost that home game, the season was over. You do have a redo here. I'm going to pick the Lakers to win this game just because they're going to have LeBron and AD, but it's tough. It's a toss-up, and I think that we are going to get the 7 and 8 in the postseason and not some great run from Sacramento or great run from the Warriors. So I'll agree that it's going to end up being Pelicans, just as we thought the 3-6 was going to be last week. So it ends up being the Pelicans after all for OKC.
It all works out in the end, but it could come down to, I mean, you have the 2 best players in the series or in that matchup with LeBron and AD, but we've seen it just with CJ McCollum in the last few weeks and Trey Murphy of just, if they get hot, it could come down to role players. And the Pelican shooters I have a little bit more faith in than the Lakers, but I think that when it comes down to it, just Anthony Davis is the defensive presence who can sort of block off the paint from a lot of things the Pelicans want to do. And then that 2-man game offensively with LeBron is just going to be too much.
Coming up, what would be the most interesting outcome for Oklahoma City and the NBA, and how will the NBA playoffs shake out? But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at Monopoly Go. Check out Monopoly Go. It's great. And if you have a competitive edge to you like I do, you're going to want to check out Monopoly Go because you can download it just as over 150 million others have. With a great twist on Monopoly, you can play your friends and hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, including the moon, and build up fantastic cities for yourself and earn yourself big, big money. So make sure you go there right now and go download the Monopoly Go app. My favorite part is that there's actual leaderboards. So a big discussion in my group chat with my friends is who has the best Monopoly board. You can go check it out too by downloading the Monopoly Go app now for free in the App Store, or Google Play Store. Check out Monopoly Go today. It's the best game out there with a classic twist, with a twist on the classic Monopoly game. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Michael, we've gone through it from a Thunder perspective. Let's take off the Thunder-colored glasses and look at this just as a storyline perspective. I think that if you're looking at this of how do you get the best matchup for the television partners, you would heavily look at that Lakers series. I think that Lakers Nuggets would be great. So like the TV partners would love them to win tonight. But whenever you look at the Lakers Thunder, you have this Lakers team who, despite being the 6th seed, would have more pressure on them than the Thunder would. Because for the Thunder, it just feels like, hey, they're going to be back here for the next half decade plus. So it doesn't feel as pressurized as it would for LA, which is very odd because typically the 1 seed is at the all-time high pressure stakes to not lose to an 8 seed, which is so rare. You also have some weird parallels of the Thunder's initial journey with KD and Russ started against the Lakers. Kobe Bryant's final postseason came against Oklahoma City. Jalen Williams grew up a Lakers fan. And again, you played them in 2010, 2012 in OKC, which really springboarded a decade of success for the Thunder in the postseason. And so I think that in terms of break out the popcorn, it's going to be the Lakers of like what would be the best series just as a neutral observer.
I don't know how I can disagree with that. I'll add some stuff. You also, no pun intended, had the Thunder rain on LeBron's parade last year when he passed Kareem for the all-time scoring record, where they beat him anyways. And it seems like LeBron's sort of taken that personally ever since, now going 3-1 against the Thunder. But you mentioned Kobe. I think I found a couple other ones of NBA legends, all-time greats who had their last playoff series against the Thunder. Your guy, Dirk, and also Tim Duncan never returned to the playoffs ever again. I don't know. I don't think that would happen to LeBron, but I think this sort of iteration of the Lakers, like you mentioned, is very volatile in terms of like this whole roster could look incredibly different next year if they get blown out or just lose flat out in the first round of the Thunder.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it would just be a mix, the perfect blend of like, here's the biggest test. Like everyone talks about an experience. Everybody talks about how the Thunder haven't done it yet. You cannot get better than LeBron James's experience. You cannot get better than what LeBron's proven to do with worse teammates going deep in playoff pushes and against teams who had better regular seasons than him, but didn't have the playoff pedigree as him. And so it would just be theater at that point. Flipping it, which matchup would land the Thunder as this flyover state, despite their success, as the NBA TV series? I think that there's a very clear answer.
It would have to be the Kings, right?
Absolutely. Kings Thunder is Tuesday, NBA TV Central.
Yeah, it's one of those games where they just put it on in the background and they're just like, it's over here if you want it. But yeah, they move a game that's going into overtime from one network over to that one to cover up your game. It's sort of the Toronto Raptors honorary NBA TV series.
Yeah, it would absolutely be an NBA TV game. And it would be the sicko pick, though, for like a fantastic series. Like, you're going to want to see these two crowds who are like, these two crowds would be the best crowds that the NBA could produce in terms of just two fan bases that really, really resonate and rally around their teams, that are really starved for postseason success. The Thunder have been one of the most successful franchises since 2010, but it feels like such a bygone era of whenever they were relevant, even though it was just a few years ago, that this fan base is ready to explode. You saw what the Kings fan base can do all of last year, all of this year. It would be raucous and it would be fun for those of us who would actually pay attention. But from a national standpoint, this series would get cast aside pretty quickly.
This would be the series that like the quote unquote NBA smart guy people would say, it's like, oh, I'm so looking forward to that. And then they don't even watch it. It's sort of like how people are talking about Orlando and Cleveland. You're not watching that series. I think it's really interesting. I don't know that it's going to be more fun than a lot of these other series, but to the idea that, let's say that this does work out and you're going to pick the Thunder and the Kings, and if you're not a Thunder fan, to watch that over Clippers, Mavs, you've got Suns, Wolves, and Lakers, Nuggets. Like, that's just a ridiculous idea.
And I think that it's even more so in NBA TV series because you look at their counterparts. There's a chance that the Hawks get that 8 seed. And if you get Trae Young against Tatum, that's a way more competitive series, even though just like we predict the Thunder would pretty much dominate the Kings, and you would also think that the Celtics dominate the Hawks. There's just a different vibe to it whenever it's Trae Young and what he brings to a game versus, you know, Sabonis and Fox. Now, I think that Sabonis and Fox are like a better combo and better players, but we all know the deal about what actually draws attention, what actually draws things in the NBA. Real quick, Michael, we're going to have you on a lot, but so this isn't like official because we don't know the matchups, but having seen the bracket, how do you think things shake out? I personally think that we're spot on with the Lakers and Nuggets and Pelicans Thunder. Presuming that actually happens, where do you see this bracket going in terms of the Western Conference?
I think Denver still comes out on top. I still think they're the best team. I know that it's sort of like everyone's hit the panic button with how they lost to the Spurs, but at the end of the day, they still have probably the best two-man game in all of basketball, and they have the best basketball player in the world. For now, like, I'm still sort of undecided, which I know doesn't make for great podcasting. I think the Thunder make it to the second round, but whether it's the Kings or the Mavericks who they play, I'm not sure. I think that they have a much better chance against the Clippers, but the Mavericks scare me a little bit. So I still think the ceiling for the Thunder is the Western Conference Finals, but I'm interested to see or hear what you think. Maybe you can help me decide.
Yeah, I think that this, you know, as everyone panics about the Lakers, I think that this couldn't shape out any better for OKC. Not only are you on the opposite side of the Nuggets, but your second round opponent now, should you not suffer a 1-8 upset, your second round opponent now is the streakiest team left in the playoffs. Whoever survives the Clippers and Mavs, which would it shock you if either one of those beat the Thunder? Absolutely not. But would it shock you if Luka and Kyrie dominate, but PJ Washington is 0 for 15 in a series? It also wouldn't shock you there either. So it couldn't shape out any better. I think that the Thunder are going to make the Western Conference Finals off of this moment right now. I think that it'll take so much out of the Clippers and out of the Mavericks to get to round two that things might dampen for them. And then you have Nuggets and I think Timberwolves in round two. I have to lean Nuggets there just because of what they've been. I'm not worried about the Nuggets at all because we saw what the Nuggets did last year, sleepwalking through the end of the season. Similar to Boston, like people are freaking out about Boston in Boston only, actually, which is kind of funny that their own fan base is the only ones turning on them. I'm not worried at all about it because of how Denver treated that into the regular season last year and still just waltzed their way to the finals pretty much. So I think that'll be Thunder, Denver, and the Western Conference Finals just on the brief rip through. Again, circle of trust does not count until after the play-in. And I think that in the East, it'll be Celtics against the Bucks.
I just don't trust the Bucks. I really want to buy.
I don't trust anybody out there.
I'll say the Knicks instead. I think that they are just more capable of grinding out some of these games. And I'm known like Tibbs, like non-believer skeptic, but it just, the Bucks are so bad just in terms of being consistent. Like we talk about consistency between the Mavericks and the Clippers. No consistency from the Bucks, and we still are. It's kind of up in the air about Giannis's health. So we have no clue, but rounding back to the West, I think you've convinced me to have the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals. This will be really important for the Thunder if they do match up with the Kings or the Pelicans to get out of that series as fast as possible. So you can put your feet up on the table, kick back and rest and sort of evaluate these teams, because I don't know about you, I can't imagine that Mavs Clippers goes anything shorter than at least 6.
Yeah, I think that the Mavericks Clippers series, even if it is Luka's time and even if he does dominate, it's going to go a pretty lengthy ways. So I think that you're spot on, especially if you get the result you want tonight in the play-in tournament games, to really capitalize on having the rest advantage. Because unless you just sweep the series against your first round opponent, you're going to end the series at home, and that cuts down your travel right in and of itself. And then you can also have a few extra days off if you finish your series before a Clippers Mavs series, which I think will get drawn out because they're a team that you're going to be locating from Texas over to California. So you get 2 off days between travel. I think that they're going to want to put them as much as possible on these marquee nights and marquee days, which includes their weekend slots. So they'll progress the series slower to ensure that as well. So I think that you can get some advantage there if you can take care of your business in the first round. And we've laid out the first round. We've talked about how dangerous each team is. I still feel really good about the Thunder being able to win the first round series, no matter who, even the Lakers, gets put on the 8 line.
Yeah, I would pick them to win any series in the first round against any of these 4 teams. Like we mentioned just ad nauseum, the Lakers have the best chance to sort of upset that, but I just don't have a lot of fear from these other teams. But I just hope that we get an interesting matchup and some fun games. Hopefully Thunder on top and they get out of the series early, but just something where we can get signs for the future to come of like, oh, Dub has really taken over, or Chet, like we didn't see this all season, or Josh's shooting continues, or Shea just completely takes over, whatever it is. I hope that there's some things that we can take from that series as we're moving forward to the second round.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. You and I will be on Twitter Spaces to watch the Pelicans Lakers tonight, and we'll run it back on Friday to see who the actual Thunder matchup is. So check out Michael on Sports on Twitter. You know to find me at Ryland_Styles. Michael, let them know what's happening over on your socials and over on your YouTube channel.
So on socials, I'm giving away an Aaron Wiggins meme poster that I got signed at a recent autograph signing of just like the man who saved basketball. I have another one, and I'm doing that on Twitter right now. There's a post you can like, and if you're following me, you're interested in that. And then I'm also doing one on my YouTube when I hit 500 subscribers. Let's Talk Thunder. And that will be a separate giveaway. So if you want to double your odds, definitely go sub over there. And then working on a couple of video breakdown projects and doing 2 pods a week.
Very fun stuff over there. Again, check us out tonight on Twitter Spaces. Subscribe to Locked On Thunder anywhere you get your podcast from, including on YouTube. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one.